I'd like to call this meeting of the Audit Committee to order. If we could all stand and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered today is unceded territory of the Wiyot people and continue to live and thrive on this land today. It is surrounded by traditional, ancestral, and present homestead of several indigenous nations, including Upa, Karuk, Nicole, Kalawala, Walpi, and Yurok that make up Humboldt and Delaware counties. Is there any public comment?
There are none.
So moving to 3.1, approval of the minutes.
I move approval. I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? 3.2, the infamous tentative budget.
What I would like to do first is to have, I'd like to talk about the budget assumptions first, especially what's going on in the state and how we filtered for the state's doing to what our actions are, and then talk about the details of that. So let's talk about the overall, like an executive summary, and then go back to page by page, if the trustees need to go page by page. Or however Julie wants to do it. We're just like,
Sure, and is it okay if I start with the assumptions page on the budget document, or
your call.
okay. Julie, can you please open the budget document, and then they'll have talk about the information that'll be there for reference. So let's see if we can go to it's PDF page 8. That is going to be really small.
Do the trustees have it up in their laptops?
It's PDF page 8 or page number 1 of the document. And I think you need to go back a few. There we go. So again, this is very, very small, but at the state level, we've been following the budget that we all have. For the past 2 years now, our revenue has been underperforming the projected expectations. So we've been having to face closing the gaps on these estimated deficits. We're currently, or when the May revised came out, we're looking at a deficit of almost $45 million, $45 billion, that is $1 billion. Despite that, there is still a COLA for community colleges, and it looks like in the May revised that the state's really still trying to keep the community colleges whole and not have them have any of the decrease with what's going on with the budget. So we take that into consideration. That 1.07% COLA does impact the student-centered funding formula by increasing the rates so our FTS rates, our supplemental rates, our student success rates. So that's all been factored in to our estimate. And we also factor in our estimated FTS, which we are currently targeting 3,781 for next year, which is, and it's stuck in my brain. It's never going to go away.
Good, thank you.
That was pre-pandemic. That was our 2019-20 FTS. And a little bit lower on the page, you can see we have our FTS history as well as our targets. And I do want to mention that for 23-24, that 3,403, that is our target FTS with our period 2 apportionment, or our period 2 apportionment report that we sent into the state or the chancellor's office. Our current FTS actual is 3,501. So we're above our target, and that's really great news for us. Using the 3 different calculations for our revenue, and that's the student-centered funding formula, given our assumptions of FTS and our supplemental counts and our student success counts. Also, in fact, also looking at the other 2 calculations, what's called the stability, or its prior year revenue plus COLA, or the hold harmless. Right now with our assumptions, the highest of the three is the student center funding formula. So Julie, if you can scroll up a little bit. Up on the page, I'm sorry. There we go. So that little center there shows the 40.6 million for the SCIF, 34.9 for hold harmless, and 39.7 for the SCIF plus COLA. What's really important about going into 24-25 is the old hold harmless ends and the new hold harmless is going to begin in 25-26. So in 24-25, our revenue, our total revenue is going to be our new floor going forward. And I know I've said this before, but it's going to be different from our current hold harmless in that it's not going to increase automatically by COLA. So we won't go lower than it, but the hold harmless won't go higher either.
So trustee,
On the three estimated, incomes level, is it that we get to identify which one we're operating on, or the system is going to say, you meet the requirements for this one, this will be your income?
We technically get to earn the highest.
Okay,
Where I say we technically get to earn, it's then the state has to have enough money to then pay us that amount.
got it.
Which currently in the current year, which is reflected in last month's monthly financial status report, is 23-24. We currently have a deficit factor that's being applied.
So which means that the state doesn't have enough money to pay us.
So
So far.
it has a deficit.
Yeah, in a way, right, but we're impacted in that, that means they don't have enough money to pay us.
Yes.
So then it puts us in a deficit.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
And we have to find that in our budget.
You saw it at the last
Right.
board meeting, and we'll talk about the assumptions this.
so I had a similar question because you used in it that the revenue that will be assumed,
correct.
but it's not going to be assumed, it's going to be used. It's not, I mean, the same question, just differently than trustee Matthews. Is we choose, but you said assume.
We're assuming that.
Oh, I see it. I understand the question.
Do you wanna-
No, please, I get it. Go ahead.
So we're assuming on all of the assumptions that we put into the calculation, but I'm trying to see the difference between assume and use.
It's,
Maybe I'm just being wrong.
No.
well, we are assuming a certain level of funding based on what we know from the state now. And we won't know exactly, as exact as the state will allow us until next
Okay.
month or the month after.
But we're going to use the skip
Yes.
money.
Right.
We just are assuming what it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's,
Yes.
okay, I got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
And the state does, or not the state, but the chancellor's office on their website, and I think it's mainly CBOs have access to it, but they have a SCIF resource tool where you can put in all your assumptions and it does all the fancy math for you.
Okay.
So that, and we usually, I'll bounce, I use my own internal calculator and I usually check it with the state just to make sure that it's in line. Mine's just a little more user friendly than theirs is. But I like to use them both.
Just a FYI, the chancellor's office, August 1st is coming out with a new dashboard
Mhm.
that's supposed to be very user friendly.
Oh, great. It's always good news.
So the really that's a deficit that we get. I mean, it makes us have a deficit. Do we ever get that money at some point?
It takes time.
It takes
It
time.
can, for example, there was a very minimal remaining deficit from 2019-20. We're finally getting that final payment this year.
So chances are we'll get it.
Well,
This is a little bit hard. Our revenue situation is a little bit, or yeah. It's more challenging than it's been.
Okay. So we shouldn't assume that we might get that money.
we are making an assumption that, we are, and I'll discuss it, like, we can discuss it now. We are making an assumption that the current deficit that the state, for the current year, it's 3.55% for our college, that it's going to be reduced by 50%. And then, so instead of a $1.4 million deficit, we're assuming more like a $700 deficit for the current year.
$700,000.
Yeah.
Thank you, 700,000.
I like the $700.
But if I could follow up with what the trustees asking. Even if we are given a 1.776 factor this year, could we assume that we would get that money back next year? I don't think we can make that assumption, since we're still getting some from 2019 now, but the state's already trying to deal with its own deficit. I can't say that I would assume that we would get.
There may be a deficit again next year.
I would be surprised if there is not for the next 2 to 3 years.
So will we do it on trans then?
We are constantly monitoring our cash flow
Okay.
to see if we may be in that situation and when. Currently, it's not with the current information we have, we're not meeting a trend, but we don't know if there might be deferrals down the line here.
Right,
And that's what we won't know until next month and month after. How the state's going to, on paper, bet try to balance its budget.
Any other revenue assumption questions? I can talk on the expense side a little bit, ready to move on. Okay.
Jump to expense.
So expenses, I think, are a little bit more straightforward. We have our salaries and our benefits, which take up the bulk of our expenditures, and we have assumed that 1.07% full pass-through to all our permanent employees. And also the associate faculty rate that we use is also assuming full pass-through, and then salary advancement for all groups. The benefits, we use our rates, our STRS and PERS rates to estimate our expenditures for those line items. We utilize our rate for SIS, for our health and welfare benefit expenditures. For our fixed expenses, we kind of typical, some we're assuming are going to go down a little bit, some increasing a little bit, but nothing really notably this year. Our other operating, we didn't change and that's other operating is actually also considered discretionary for departments. There's no change there. We're not increasing or decreasing. We're just holding it flat. Our capital outlay includes $100,000, and then our transfers out. We have the $90,000 as typical to the Child Development Center. We have the amount going out to the Shively Farm. $750,000 going out to OPEB. But if you recall, there was a resolution that was passed that if we need it, that transfer out will be diverted to the community stadium project instead. I just want to make sure to remind everyone of that. And then $500,000 to our debt service. And that is for our community stadium, the certificate of participation that we did, that's going to be going to the community stadium. So with those assumptions, yes, please go to the next page. Thank you. So this is PDF page 9 or it's document page 2 if you're following the paper copy. Here is the actual tentative budget for 24-25. But we start with a little bit of history so we can see our actuals for 22-23, and we can scroll down just a tiny bit. Perfect. So in 22-23, we ended with a 25% ending fund balance, which is phenomenal. For the current year, estimated for 23-24. On the revenue side, if you look at that state apportionment, that 39.1 million, that is down from what was adopted in the final budget, and that's because we're factoring in the deficit that we've been discussing. So it's that $700,000 and some $1,000 deficit that we've decreased our revenue section by there. And then our salary benefits, all our other expenditures, and you can see that our expenditures are slightly more than the revenues that we have coming in. So we're assuming that we're going to eat into our fund balance a little bit and that we're going to end at about 17.7% at the end of this fiscal year.
So in benefits, is there anything for the part-time faculty?
We will talk about that in closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Then for 24-25, as we discussed, the state apportionment, assuming that we're gonna be funded by the SCIF, that's that $40.6 million figure. There's minimal increases in other state, I think mainly due to lottery. We have, based on enrollment. So if we have higher enrollment, we can typically assume higher lottery. For our salaries and benefits, as I mentioned, the assumptions behind those increases. And then our typical transfers out, as I mentioned, and we're gonna, again, another scenario where revenues are a little less than our expenditures, and we're digging into our reserve a little bit and going down to 13.4% estimated for the end of next year. We'll pause there for questions.
Kind of, you said before that, the deficit we were looking at, something percent was 1.4 million, but we thought it really would be half of that. Why do we think it will be that?
We have usually assumed that when we've seen a deficit, and I'll say more in the past few years, when we've had a deficit, we've assumed that in the near future, it would be reduced to zero. So we haven't always, and it's usually minimal, we haven't always reflected it. So we're kind of along those same lines. We're assuming, well, it's going to be decreased by 50% instead of the down to nothing, but we've assumed in the past.
And we're gonna have to wait and see what the tax revenue is for the state, which is coming up late, to figure out how much money. And what we're doing is if you see that estimated 3.14 fund reserves, we are still looking very closely at all positions and consolidating where we can and reinvesting funds in areas that helps us increase enrollment.
Okay, then Julie, can you scroll to the next page? I don't know how in detail you want me to get, but I thought I'd touch on the areas where you might have questions. Let's see, yeah, perfect. So this one, I wasn't sure if this would jump out at you, but we're assuming our enrollment's going up, yet we're assuming a decrease in our enrollment fees. That one is, so that 991,490 estimate for 23-24, that came from the state. Our actual enrollment fee revenue so far this year is actually closer to about $940,000. So we just haven't budgeted down, adjusted our budgeted amount for the current year. So that 950,000 is more in line with what I think a more realistic estimate for enrollment fees for next year. Let's see. Then if you can go to the next page.
I had two questions on this page.
Yeah.
So the unsecured property taxes, there's nothing for.
No, that one's really hard to budget for. So instead, thank you for asking that. Both the unsecured and secured are reflected in the secured line item.
Okay.
So that 11.4 will be total property tax.
It's totally unsecured, okay. And then the lottery's gone down? Is that a statewide trend or? I was just, I don't do the lottery, so I don't know, but it dropped down.
From 22 to 23.
Yeah, 800.
Oh, well, it depends on the many available to get spread out throughout the pot. So they must have had a higher year.
Okay,
And we still, that 602,290 that's assumed for the current year. We may need to increase that depending on what our receipts are. Lotteries usually, we get a rate an estimated rate from the chancellor's office to start with in the beginning of the fiscal year. I don't know. I feel like it's usually that they get more than what their estimate is, but it's really hard to tell.
yeah, I was just curious if there was a trend with the economy and people watching their money. That's what I asked. Thank you.
Or some people hoping to.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
And get more money.
Yeah.
You need to.
You have to play.
Yeah.
But the estimate for 24-25 is up again a little bit.
But still way below the actual 22, 23.
Right.
No.
So you can see how much of an art this is to budgeting versus what the science is. So this is as best as, but also as best as it's conservative. Because we can make this.
Right. Always.
Any other questions about the revenues? Okay, next page, please, and this is just a chart. Just so you can kind of see, the biggest chunk of our revenue comes from the state apportionment. So we're pretty much reliant upon that, and those would be other pieces. So then property tax is a pretty good chunk as well, and then the profit would be EPA. And this one, the beginning fund balance is going in there as a source, just in case. I mean, it's considering everything, the revenue coming in and the money sitting in the bank, so to speak. And when we're looking at all sources. Then let's see. 11. If we can jump to PDF page 14, please, Julie. Thank you. So this, I just wanted to point out, this is the chart that's just our expenditures. So you can see between salaries and benefits, we're at about 81% when we're pretty much in line with our final budget for last year. We were at 82%. So we haven't really changed much as far as the percentage of where we spend our money, what we spend it on. The next page, please, Julie. So this is the salary analysis, and I just wanted to point out, because there's a pretty big increase here for the non-instructors regular. You see that 170% increase. That is because from in 24-25, there are several positions that are funded by categorical funds, and those funds have been maxed out. And so we're having to shift those positions onto the unrestricted general fund, and then both of them are counselors, which fall into that non-restricted regular category. Let's see.
So I had a question on the, so probably to Dr. Flamer. So the administrators, the budget for that, is that with the your current lineup?
Yes.
Okay. With the change, well, I mean, it's a moving target, so to speak.
We took our best guess at the best estimate at the financial impacts of that, and those are reflected in salaries.
Okay.
109, and yes.
Okay, and then the next page, please, Julie. So just for comparison year over year, I wanted to point out that last year we had for the full-time faculty or faculty regular, we were actually at 29%. We're now at 31%. And last year at this time for the associate faculty, we're at 25%. Now we're at 24%. So we're relying a little bit more on our full-time faculty for our scheduling. And next,
Which was on purpose.
But it's 1%, one professor, or I'm sorry, that's too technical. I know that wasn't a fair question.
I don't think I even understood your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, so if we've gone up 1% to full time, what does that equate to as far as a body?
Well, it depends on the total number.
Yeah, that's don't ask. It doesn't. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
next, PDF page 19, please.
I had a question on 18.
Oh, okay, let's go. 18.
So my question was, the sewer bill, I always ask this, so the sewer is from Del Norte, then not because of the campus here, we have our septic system.
We still incur sewer fees.
Okay,
Regardless.
and I think the water was my other question, that it went down. Water bills are going up.
I was basing it off of where we were in our current year estimates.
Okay.
Not actual class, our actual,
Actually,
and kind of went off of that.
Yeah,
So I tried to look at the history, and so it looks like we're actually a little lower than budgeted for. And so I wanted to make sure that was reflected in the next year's budget, so we weren't over budget.
because I just keep getting notices in Eureka and how cutting about increases. That was why I was asking.
I think 2 years ago, might have been 1 or 2 years ago, we did have a similar increase. I haven't seen anything for the current.
Well, we got caught for, what was that?
Where we were getting underbilled.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
for smaller pipe size than we actually have.
Yeah.
We have the water leak.
Oh, yes, we did.
which caused us to pay a lot more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so now we won't have that, right?
Any,
That's hopefully true.
Okay, so that makes sense.
and any other questions on this, on page 18?
Was there any questions about the budget or anywhere?
Oh, are you done?
I'm ready to fast track if that's what we need to do. Do you want to jump to any particular sections where people have questions?
I had a question on the Shiley Farm.
Sure.
So where are we with the money, so to speak? Have we spent all the capital outsource money? Because I noticed, I think we're down here, the capital outlay was pretty minimal this year or for next year.
And are you talking about the Caltrans?
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
original Caltrans
we
money.
still have, I'm gonna throw this out, about
What?
100,000.
Okay, then that was what is in here, yeah.
But one thing I did want to mention is that recently we were able to renegotiate the MOU,
Okay,
and we're actually going to be able to utilize on the instructional side where it's an endowed amount.
right,
There's gonna be an expand usage of the earnings on that. We can also now use it for management. It's not just for instructional purposes.
and what, was that $1 million?
Yes,
The gross aggregate? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, okay,
so
and
that's
it's still $1 million.
correct.
Right, because
That's
the
endowment.
interest.
So what that means is we may be able to start decreasing the transfers out to the farm in the future.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I don't know where I would find it one of these. And I wasn't here last month, so I don't know if it had been discussed recently. But where are we on the write-off of the student debt?
Yeah.
We are we talking dollars, or are we keeping up on writing off the old?
That's what I'm talking about is we were making a regular write-off of the old debt that we knew was too old to collect or anything. I'm just curious as to where we're on.
We are still doing that. We have been doing that at the end of every fiscal year for at least the last 4 or 5 years now. And we plan to do it, we budgeted for it again this year.
So is there a balance in it that we?
There is, so we have, when we talk balancing, like an account receivable balance.
Like how much debt is
Off the top of my head, I don't recall, but I know our older debt is down, it's a lot less than it used to be. So
It's
the-
drastically lower.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the receivables that we really don't think we're going to recoup, we've been writing, those are very low. So the bulk of our current debt is still believe we have a chance.
And even this,
Yeah.
the last time I saw figures, the amount of more current, so to speak, student debt was lower than it used to be.
That's
We
true.
were incurring less student debt going
Yes,
forward
you're right.
than we had.
Mhm.
Right, so, okay.
And now, isn't it scheduled the board gets a report at some time during the year on this?
We do it every year, and in the past, we have actually included it in, Julia's admin. report.
Right,
I
but
don't
what
know when
month?
last time we did that, but I'll have to look.
Well, because I think there was in some other section of our board packet
Yeah,
that
it
came
is.
up as well.
Yes, so we'll go back and, did you have to know, Julie, where we stand with that? I haven't looked at that for
Because
you.
I remember I asked one time and you corrected me and said it will be in this month.
Yes, sorry, I didn't know if I sounded like that, but I probably did.
And are you still doing the reach out and the follow up and over to the collection agencies like you have been? Or,
Not to the third party because it was proving to not be very beneficial.
Okay.
But we've still been participating in the co-top program, which is the Chancellor's Office tax offset program, is what that's for, when they make it available to
Okay.
us.
Is there anything else that stands out that we want to discuss in this tentative budget? A lot of it may not be.
Yeah, I think we really touched on, the big items. I mean, the only other thing was the restricted, budget, if there was any questions about that, but it was more, about their salary benefits going down because we're moving the categoricals off of categorical funding and restricted general funding.
So just a question to clarify. So the transfer out for 750,000 that the board voted that the OPEB,
Okay.
that we voted that if we need it, we will use it for the stadium. What are we doing about that in this budget?
In the 24-25.
Yeah,
So it's still assuming on paper that it's gonna go to OPEB, but there is a notation on the assumptions page that it may be diverted to the community stadium.
so that's another 750,000.
Correct, there was.
So it's
2 years.
$1,500,000 then now.
It was this current year and then the budget year.
Right, coming, and does the board need to approve by resolution? That is my question, or I know it's a notation in the budget.
No, because the board, I'm sorry, excuse me.
I thought we already approved doing.
For this year. I'm saying for 20,
Both years.
we did for both years.
For the project, yes.
Okay, well, I didn't realize, I thought we had only done it for this year, so thank you.
I'll
Sorry,
make sure.
I would make sure that we proved it for 2 years,
That was my understanding.
I'll go back and reach.
because we wouldn't know the budget yet. That would be my thought.
It was because it was in the forecast.
Okay,
Oh, we didn't talk about forecast.
I think we did in terms of what the fundings are.
well, it doesn't, if you just double check, because it's easy to rectify,
That's a good idea.
you know,
Okay, that's a good idea.
I would have. So you want to talk about how it's gonna look rosy in the next 2 years?
It's, oh, you're being facetious.
Well, it's, as you can see here, thanks for pulling this up, Julie, we're at, there's again, assuming we're gonna end at 13.4% next year. For 25-26, we are assuming a 2% COLA. And then again, that affects our skiff rates, but we're also assuming that passes through to our employees. We're also assuming salary schedule advancement,
We're talking step increases.
yeah, so increases. So 2% in both of the forecast years for COLA is assumed. And you'll see, in 25-26, again, our expenditures are outpacing our revenues, but then, we're picking back up, in 26-27, to increasing our fund reserve again. So balancing out, so to speak.
You know, there's one thing to keep in mind is there are some of the categorical funds which I did email the board about that did not receive a COLA increase, even though we pass on COLA, even if they're within a certain funding source. And that's why some of the money is being overspent. That's why we move people off of some of those funds to general fund. It's because we want employees to get salary increases, step increases, but the state is not providing it in some categories. Only ones like, yes, not all.
By contract,
Yes,
do we have to pay that? Like if they're under the. Do you have
Well,
to pay? How does
yes,
that work?
yes, we do, but if you remember, maybe you don't, but the state passed a law that said that now if we're going to lay off or release a classified employee, they're now in the same category of schedule as full-time faculty. So it's no longer within 30 days or 60 days. We have to do it by March, just like faculty do. So we're always trying to guess of what's happening here. Which makes it more artsy for us.
Sure.
So are we good since we have another huge thing to hear about?
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut short, but I thought we've got, the next one's gonna be a big one. So, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Vice President Morrison, for an outstanding job as always. And I'd like to move on to 3.3, the refunding of the Measure Q. I believe you have folks.
Yes.
So there he is. Hi, Karma. So Karma has joined us today to walk through, I think, the current outlook for the, what the refunding amount could look like. And then you'll see there are these other documents, and they're just here, for, so we'll be doing for discussion. So Karma, I'll go ahead and let you walk through the presentation.
Sure, and good afternoon to the audit committee, Dr. Flamer and staff there. We also sent a presentation. I don't know, it's a 2-page, 3-page presentation. Julia, I'm not sure if that's also available, but I'm happy
Yeah,
to
let's see,
just.
Julie, do you have that?
All right, great. And just FYI, we're also joined by your municipal advisor, KNN. They're also on the line here. So, as Daniel Arruda from KNN went through the presentation, the last board meeting, and gave you an overview, what I thought what I'll do today was just give an update on where the refunding is now.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
Sure, sorry.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
So I wanted to give you an update on where the refinancing is now. If we turn to page 1, so unfortunately, since the last board meeting, due to some inflationary economic data, as well as the Fed on May 22nd talking about having rates stay higher for longer, the U.S. Treasury rates actually increased quite substantially over the past month, to about 40 basis points for the 10-year. So if you look at that chart at the bottom where we zoomed in there, 40 basis points increase, so almost 0.5% increase in less than a month. And so if we turn to the next page, I wanted to kind of set the stage on where the savings were in the last board meeting. We had taxpayer savings of a little bit over 500,000. We're now closer to 400,000, and the present value savings were at 4%. We're a little bit over 3% right now. What I would say is, the GFSA standard for refinancing is typically 3% or greater, but the district historically has done savings of 4 to 5% or greater. If you look at last year, we came to the board and we did a refinancing where we saved the taxpayers 5%. So unfortunately, the savings are come down a little bit, but as Julia noted, there's some documents that are coming to the board later today for approval. And I think the idea is we get the approval, but have a threshold that the board and the team here would like to hit before we move forward and incur any cost. But at least that would give us the opportunity to be ready to move forward once the market turns in our favor. And so that's kind of where the rate savings are currently. And some of the documents that were pulled up, the escrow agreement, that's the document that is between your escrow agent, paying agent, and the district. And the most important document is the resolution, which has the parameters for this refinancing, the not to exceed size, and the bonds that are being refunded. Again, savings have declined a little bit. It's still over the 3% standard, but I leave it up to the board to decide if there's a threshold that they would like to hit, whether it's total taxpayers or a percent, and then we can always be ready to move forward whenever we get to that number. Happy to take any questions.
I don't think I received this presentation. I was talking to Dr. Flamer about interest rates and stuff.
No, I just, Karma provided it to me and I just provided it to Julie for her to be able to show.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, but there's a whole lot of data there that we're not familiar with at all.
Mhm.
It's just a concern of mine. Trustee Matthew?
Well, so in all of this, what the committee and what the board is looking at is there a certain percentage of refunding that we want to hit before we say, yes, we're going to do this?
Is that,
So that's the question for you. You know, we had come again in the past. The district has issued refunding bonds at 4, 5, 6% savings. Currently, we're a little bit below that, but the documents are going to be in front of you later today to get that approved. And you know, with your guidance, whether it's here or at the board meeting, if you tell us, you know, we really want savings of X amount, whether it's a dollar or percent, we'll be cognizant of that and we won't move forward or incur any cost before we get to that number. I think the idea is get the documents approved so we're ready. As you can see with the information that I just presented, the market moves pretty volatile in a week or a few weeks time period. And so we want to just be ready in case the district does want to move forward with a threshold that matches your requirements.
So what's our current interest rate?
So your current interest rate is, if you look at this page that you're looking at, the line that says average rate of prior bonds, that's what you're paying for the bond currently. So 4.51%.
Okay.
And then with the refinancing, we will be able to lower it to 3.16 based on current rates. And then at the last board meeting, the savings were based on 2.79%.
And so,
And for the committee's benefit, we did go through a similar process in 2022 when we were looking to do this refunding as an advance refunding. Unfortunately, you know, the documents were passed. The committee had recommended for the board to go ahead and approve all documents. And unfortunately, the market never came back for the refunding. So at this point in time, what I think we're trying to show is here's an update in terms of the refunding. If this refunding provides a certain savings threshold, which the board will direct us to, then at that point in time, once the approval of the documents has taken place and the market returns, hopefully in a favorable way, we can go ahead and try to continue with the process to see these refunding savings actually be actualized.
And what's the cost of doing this? And then if we go south, what is the district out as far as funding or cost?
And so that's the idea here. You know, the district won't be billed for anything until we go to the rating agencies. At that time, with the rating agencies, even if the district does not move forward, the rating agency will bill the district. And so that's why we want to be in a comfortable position where we will definitely move forward and meet the district's threshold. Prior to the rating agencies, the district will not incur any cost associated with this financing. And then Danielle, if you want to share what total cost might be. And all just FYI, all of the savings that you see here, that includes our estimated cost for everything.
Thanks, Karma. Yeah. So in the resolution, there are estimates in terms of the costs potentially to be incurred with the refunding, and these are based on our best estimates. At this point, we had estimated approximately $233,000 in potential costs. And as Karma said, this would not be a cost that is paid for through the district's general fund. Instead, this would be a cost that would be taken care of through the issuance. So bond proceeds would be used to offset these costs.
okay.
not out.
So you're right, we're not out.
Yeah.
So is the question for the audit committee is, what's a reasonable threshold to put in the resolution?
Well, I have a different question, or I'd like to just throw out here. I have a bit of a concern that we're going to be, I don't want to say messing around with bonds, but we're going to be coming up with the bonds in the public's eye and refinancing. And will that get confused with going out for a bond issue in November? I mean, if somebody reads in the paper, CR redid the Measure Q bonds, and then if they're looking at voting, are these two gonna come together in people's minds? I know we sitting here at the board level go, they're very separate. But to Joe Q public, a bond is a bond. I don't know. If it's something that I've been thinking about.
I would think if there's any publicity or public information about this, it would be the college's responsibility to explain what it is, which is lowering the cost to the public.
I understand that,
You
yeah,
know, and yeah, but I mean,
but then we're going out for a bond.
I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
but it would be our responsibility to make clear what the college, what this is that we're doing.
Yeah,
They're saving you this much on your tax bill.
but when the voters, I mean, I'm just saying, it's a concern of mine that when the voters there looking at the bond measure in November, if that's what we decide, they go, well, we just did this bond refinance or something. I know
Yeah,
we're sitting here,
we have to
we're living it,
be
but
sure it was explained.
yeah,
And I think the onus will most likely go to the steering committee who's going to lead the conversation about the bond. So if the board approves the resolution for a bond, then we need to form a steering committee to help position it, and it's not part of the college, it's part of some of the.
At which point you can say, in fact, with our previous bond, we have cut the cost to taxpayers.
Right.
right.
That has to be a some forward.
And you're right, that's a good question, but we've struggled with that as well. I think it's pretty positive position.
You know, if it's helpful for the board, many districts actually, as they look at a new election, do use a refinancing as a press release publicity to say, hey, we've been good stewards of your bonds.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good.
We did that last time.
Yes.
So
So we should.
I'm just looking for, you know, so we're just over 3% right now. So you're saying that there's a possibility because of the volatility that could increase back up to closer to 4 or even more percent.
That's what happened last time.
So are we saying that 3% wouldn't be enough to make it worth it? I'm just trying to understand it, how we would decide what our threshold should be.
And what was the threshold before the volatility in the market? What were we looking at?
For this issuance?
Yeah.
This is a brand new conversation.
Oh, I thought you said that when you first started the charts, there was a interest rate.
That was the refunding that we just did a couple of years ago.
Okay, but I thought during this presentation, you mentioned a percentage, but the market went volatile and there wasn't the savings that you had anticipated a month ago.
So that information is in that first column under the prior board meeting. The percentage of savings of refunding bonds, the 4.04%, was the prior refunding estimate. Given the market volatility, that has declined, as Karma said, to 3.13%.
That was my question. Thank you.
For the committee's benefit, the 2023 refunding generated almost an even 5% in refunded savings.
What is the time period over which we would be looking as to whether the savings would increase or not?
There's no specific time period. However, what I would tell you is from the time the board passes the resolution and then we go to the rating agencies and get a rating, that typically takes about 2 weeks for the rating agency to get us a rating. And so, you know, typically once we get your go ahead at the board meeting, we'll monitor this on an active basis. And then as soon as savings are more than 4%. We'd like to obviously have a cushion before we go to the rating agencies. That time period is about 2 weeks or so. And then after that, we could price the bonds a week after we get the ratings. And so once we move forward with the rating agency, we can get it done within 3 weeks or so.
We need to pass the resolution.
Right.
Yes.
So that's important.
I
To allow
With the baseline
Right.
percentage.
Right, I understand. Okay,
Is there a recommended baseline percentage at this point? I forgot his name. Parma, do you have a recommendation on baseline percentage?
The GFSA standard is 3%. We're over that, but I think historically, you've done 4 or 5%. So I would shoot for. I would recommend at least shooting for at least 4%.
That's at 3%, you're only saving 400,000. And you look at the brain damage of saving that when next year it may, with different politics, it may be much lower. I mean, that's
There's
the
a lot
thing.
of what ifs.
Yeah, well, especially, yeah, that's what I'm saying is that we can't really save a bunch of money. You're only saving 400,000 on 11 million. Plus what out of that 400,000, what is the cost?
So the cost is included in that
the-
400,000. But trustee, I think if I was a taxpayer, a round number sounds good. I think that over 500,000 is a good sounding number, but I leave it up to you guys to if there's even a higher number, whether it's 5% or something
I
different.
think 5% is probably the high.
Yeah, I mean, I think borderline 4.5 would work. I mean, I'm still worried about if the board decides to do the November election, we gotta.
I understand. I think that we will be able to position it very positively.
right.
I do 4.5. It'd be agreeable. What do you guys think?
I know this is crystal ball stuff, but what is the chance in the next 2 to 3 weeks that it could increase all the way to 4.5 or 5? I mean, we don't really know, right?
Yeah, no way of knowing.
Karma,
First
it
of
might be
all-
helpful, I think, to point out the sensitivity analysis at the bottom of the slide there.
Right, great point.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So as Danielle said, at the bottom there, you have current rates plus or minus 25 basis points. And so if we have a move of 25 basis points lower, we get to about 4% savings again. Rates move up and down, and we're coming into the summer months where it's a favorable supply-demand dynamic for issuers because there's a lot more bonds being redeemed, and so there could be an opportunity for rates to decline enough to get over that 4% again. Just to as Daniel might have mentioned, when you pass the resolution, there's no real end date to that, and so we'll continue to monitor whether if it takes a few weeks or a couple of months.
That was my earlier question.
And we're just making a recommendation to the full board. The board's going to discuss this number again.
Yes, correct.
Correct. I mean, when I report out. So we're running, I hate to say it, running out of time here. Do we want to do 4, 4.5, 5, 21?
So
No.
according to this chart, which is easier for me to see here,
I know it's
at
tough.
4%, we would be saving $1,000.
Good.
Which seems reasonable to me.
Me too.
So you two are 4 and I'm 4.5. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean. Sure, you always want more.
I'm just looking at all the work it is.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
but like you said, 500,000 is good, so.
on 11 million. That's what I look at.
May I offer comment?
Uh-huh.
I know you try to close up.
Yeah.
The other point that we could make is that any savings to the taxpayer
Yes.
is a positive,
Right.
regardless if it's
Right.
by $50,000.
Yeah, maybe we get too picky.
Yes. Anything we can give to them right now is positive.
Okay.
So you're gonna recommend 4% to the full board when they discuss it.
With a, what is it called? A deviant opinion?
Well, I wouldn't call it a deviant opinion.
No, what is that opinion called? Dissenting. Good.
I
Yeah.
was something.
Yeah, dissenting. So I think that that's it. Thank you all, and I adjourn the audit meeting.
Thank you so much.